Welcome back to the Graveyard Shift. I am your host for today, Andrew Witherspoon. I am joined today by V89's extremely knowledgeable FSU football experts, the co-host of Tomahawk Talk, Cole Kruger, and sports director Will McBroom. We are also joined today by a special guest, Matt LaSerre, recruiting expert and analyst for WordChant.com. Matt, thanks for being here today. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and what you bring to the table here?
Oh, what I bring to the table? Obviously, as you said, I work for WordChant.com, so I'm going on year 4 from straight out of college at Florida State. A lot of recruiting stuff, both basketball and football. Just kind of varies whatever's going on. A lot recently, obviously, with fall camp starting, has shifted more to team stuff. So the connections you get in recruiting often relay into that, which has made a good way to get a lot of intel going into fall camp and going into the season this week.
Well, as you mentioned, FSU football is now 9 days away from their opening game against New Mexico State. This is truly exciting stuff. There are lots of bigger picture things that we could discuss and have discussed about the state of the program, Mike Norvell, NIL, FSU athletics, and college football as a whole. But at the end of the day, the players will take the field, led by this coaching staff, in less than 2 weeks. So the goal for today is to give FSU students and fans as much information as possible about what to expect from this team. Because let's be honest, this has been a very quiet offseason for Florida State football, and I wouldn't blame anybody for not having any idea what they will see when the season starts. So we're going to go position by position, break down who we think are the most important players, what we expect to see from them, and then hopefully by the end of this episode, we'll have covered everything there is to cover about this 2026 Florida State football team. So we'll start with the wide receiver position, which is one that I feel like a lot of people are optimistic about, know a good bit about it already. So I'll go ahead and get started. My best player that I have in this group is Deuce Robinson. I feel like that's no surprise to anybody.
I think that's a good call.
I think we'll all agree on that here. My favorite is Mekhi Danzy. I think they've talked a lot about his progression from being just a speed guy to a more polished receiver. I'm hopeful that he can take that step. And then my sleeper / X Factor picks are Jason Lopez, who, if you've been tuning to any news coming out of fall camp, they've been talking about him a ton. Also, sophomore Tayshawn Gelsey and Javon Boggs, both that are kind of flying under the radar because they didn't do a whole lot in their freshman seasons, but I'm expecting a good bit from them this season. So, Will, you want to take next?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of those. I think Deuce Robinson obviously is the easy call as best there, and you could go him as favorite as well. Danzy is super exciting, though, just the word out of fall camp being that, in terms of being a true wide receiver, route tree-wise, et cetera, he's going to really take another step this year, and that would be huge for them to just not have to constantly feed Deuce Robinson the football and to have another option there beyond, the Gus Malzahn, jet sweeps to get him the ball. Devin Carter's another name that I still think you could throw out there. I know that Lopez has seemingly separated himself a little bit out of the freshman guys in that class, but with the somewhat limited depth, I would still expect Carter to get some playing time there, so maybe we could see more from him as well.
No, and I like the Devin Carter call as well because Andrew didn't mention him, which I was honestly surprised about, obviously talking about Jason Lopez, but I was actually reading an article on ESPN about the top 51 freshmen that can make an immediate impact, and they had Devin Carter at number 2 out of the ACC, just behind Jackson Cantwell from Miami, so I'm excited to see what he has. I think besides using the word sleeper, X factor is a big word for me, especially in the wide receiver room, and I think it's Javon Boggs because no one really knows what to expect from him, especially I don't know what his injury update is now, if he's fully healthy, if he's fully ready to go, but I know in the spring he was a little bit banged up, and him and Deuce, so that was allowing Devin Carter and Jason Lopez to get a little bit more reps. But I don't think anyone really knows what Javon Boggs can bring to the table. I think a lot of people were excited about him last season, me included. This season, I hope he can take that next step. I hope he can function into a more Mekhi Danzy role because they are similar players in terms of their play style. I think Danzy is obviously a little bit quicker than Javon Boggs, but I'm hoping that he can take that next step and jump into that third wide receiver role because with those 3 guys, if Boggs can do what he is expected to do, especially as a recruit coming out of high school, I mean, that's up there for one of the best wide receiver trios, at least in the ACC. I don't want to talk about all of college football because it's not fair to address Florida State with the rest of the college football landscape. But in the ACC, I think you'd struggle to find a better wide receiver trio than those 3.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking coming out of high school, Lopez and Boggs are probably 2 of the best Florida high school receivers in the history of the state. just because, Boggs had a bunch of records, and I think Lopez got pretty close to those records too. Y'all mentioned Devin Carter. It's an interesting one. I think when we were out there last week, he did have a green jersey, so I think part of the reason why we haven't heard about him as much this fall camp is just because he's been banged up a little bit as well. That's normal for fall camp, but for the most part, yeah, I agree with y'all, what y'all have been saying. If Boggs can finally come into his own, he has been in practice from fall to spring. He had a little bit of a knee injury in the spring that leaked into the fall. We didn't think it was going to leak into the fall, but it wasn't that bad. He was still doing a lot of work, and as of right now, I think he's still technically limited just to kind of keep him from hurting himself or doing anything more, but he is full go, which is good to see. I would still expect him to be that starting third wide receiver as of now. I wouldn't be surprised. Mike Norvell loves his oars, so we could get an or Jason Lopez, I would think would be the one to compete with him there. But yeah, and also, yeah, what y'all brought up with Danzy is a really good point. I actually had someone ask me a week or two ago, like, which do I think is a better receiver, Boggs or Danzy? And I said, well, I'm going to pick Danzy just because I've seen more of him, right? I've seen his speed, and from what we're hearing, he is becoming a more polished wide receiver, and you can't blame him for that taking a while because he just started playing the position a year ago. So it's just getting up to speed in that, but I think he's done a good job at that. He was recruited as an athlete, so you have to remember that it wasn't always going to be just running back. But with Boggs, I think Boggs is probably the better overall wide receiver just because he's always played the position his whole life, right? He knows what to do. It's just a matter of staying healthy for him, right? That's what it's always been. Even last year, he was really good. He was expected to be really good. They couldn't get him the ball, and then he got hurt, and then he had that scare again after the NC State game as well. So you just need him to stay healthy. If he stays healthy, I know you said you didn't want it to say best wide receiver room in college football. It does have a chance. If everything goes well and goes the way you think it could, it does have a good chance to be there with, Deuce is going to be an all-star guy. His only knock last year was that you need to catch the ball at the highest point, right? Like, that's how you lost the Virginia game, even though we can get into a debate on that of whether or not you should be going frame by frame on replay, but that's just today's day and age of college football. But other than that, and that's probably a pretty easy fix. But yeah, they do have a chance to be to compete with, like, I don't want to say Miami, but Miami is one of those top receiver rooms.
Regarding the depth chart, we just discussed most of it, I feel like, already, but Deuce number 1, Danzy number 2.
Yep. Is
there any chance that Boggs?
No, I think Boggs will stay at that 3 spot. Just because, look, you're looking at smaller guys, right? They're not going to not be a slot. Now, Tim Harris has said, like, we're not, like, we don't want them competing at one spot. They're going to line up everywhere. Deuce is going to line up everywhere. That's been the nature of both Norvell and Malzahn's offenses, right? Even if you look at both of them, they still like to move everybody around and play each spot. So on a depth chart, and Mike Norvell said today when we talked to him that how much does the depth chart really matter? And he doesn't like it to matter because if it's someone in this situation is a starter in this package, but it's not a starter in this package, so who is a starter, who's not, whatever it is. But it's, yeah. I don't think there's going to be any change there.
Right. And then after that, for me, I have Jason Lopez being the number 4 receiver, we feel like, going into week 1. And then between Gelsey and Carter, how are you guys feeling? Because I didn't put Devin Carter in my sleeper list just because in the fall, I feel like Lopez and especially Gelsey, I feel like in the fall they mentioned his name a lot, maybe separated a little bit. But in the spring, Carter was getting a lot of talk for sure. Who do you feel will be the next one out of that group?
I think it's just interesting between, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but between Carter and Jason Lopez, I feel like one of them has the inside track to taking punt and kick returns.
And that would be Lopez.
Yeah, so more so. And I feel like in years past, like we saw with Jalen Lucas last year, when they have a guy that's pretty much the primary returner, they're not going to get a lot of reps at the wide receiver position. Like Jalen Lucas was playing more in the backfield. So I like being able to move guys around, but Gelsey has a little bit more height. He's 6'4" compared to Devin Carter and Jason Lopez being 6'1", 6
different
foot.
kinds of receivers.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't mind throwing him out there where you have a little bit more height, especially with Boggs and Danzy as well are only 6', 6'1" respectively. So throwing him out there with a little bit more height. But Jason Lopez, that's what I'm worried about. If they want to put him into a more, returner role, how much run is he going to get at the wide receiver position?
I think when you look at that, you look at Keon Coleman too. They used him as a punt returner, and they put him at wide receiver all the time, obviously. But so I don't know. I don't think that'll have much of an effect on it. I think just having a punt return unit you can send out there is the biggest worry, just especially from last year, all the issues you had there, and having someone who can just catch the ball. I don't care about running it. Just catch the ball and we'll figure it out from there. But it's I think Lopez has got the inside track to be that guy pretty easily. Again, Devin Carter, I don't want to say it's fallen off, but definitely hasn't had as good of a fall camp as he did in the spring. Gelsey is an interesting one because, he's probably, if you look at it too deep, he's probably going to be listed right after Deuce just because of the size. It's a weird wild card because coming out of high school, that was a kid who he was actually, I think he was listed as a tight end. And one of the reasons why he chose Florida State over Florida in the end was, there was a whole debate of whether or not Florida dropped him, but we'll keep that aside. He wanted to go to Florida State because they liked him as a wide receiver and not a tight end. So that was a big thing for him. And it's been cool to see a lot of these second-year guys kind of get their flowers this camp. It wasn't like Gelsey wasn't a name you heard last year when he was here at all or in the fall, or in the spring. So it's good to see that you still are getting that depth down the line because there's some of these positions that will go through, like the depth is definitely a worry.
Yeah, I agree. I think wide receiver, just looking at, I had 6 names listed on my depth chart, and like that should be, you feel good about that. So we'll move on to running back now, another part of the offense. Will, you want to get started?
Yeah, I think the best is clearly Chroma. I think that he's really stepped up from the sound of it in fall camp to claim when it sounded like at the beginning when they brought in Wisner that it was going to be more of a 1-2 punch, and not that it won't be. They're going to use presumably all 3 guys, but it sounds like Chroma has kind of taken that RB1 position. Singleton, another guy who, from what I've heard recently, might be in that second slot currently. Wisner's dealt with injury, maybe had a little bit of trouble adapting, which you don't want to overreact to that in fall camp either. Maybe just injury, a little bit of more time to adapt through the beginning of the season. He could, step up into that role. But I think right now it feels like Chroma, Singleton, Wisner is pretty firmly the top 3.
Yeah, I think the biggest question that fans and everybody has going into the season regarding the running backs is just the size of the rotation. It's been not fun to watch the last couple of years where a guy will get a 15-yard run and then you won't see him for the rest of the game, and 4 or 5 other guys will get mixed in that same amount of time. And just based on what we've heard with interviews with the coaches, hearing stuff throughout camp, Cam Martin, I don't think is going to let that fly. I feel like his goal is to have a bell cow, to have a guy that he knows can go out there and play, obviously not the entire game, but get most of the carries. And based on from what we've heard, I feel like Usman Chroma is that guy.
And he's been pretty consistent because every year he's been a running backs coach. He's had an 1,000-yard rusher, and that's been a very, even off the record, talking to him or people around, that's still a pretty big goal of his. I don't think he wants that to go away because it's something you can use in recruiting a lot and has helped. So that they do want that guy, and it'll be a lot of 21 personnel. You'll see a lot of 2-back sets. Sam Singleton's definitely made that interesting of whether or not he's going to be the top guy with Wisner when it goes to that 2-back set or those sets. Wisner is back fully. I believe that happened yesterday. So that was that was just a weird thing because he hasn't played in either scrimmage. So it'll be kind of interesting to see if that hurts him a little bit when we get into game time, but you can use New Mexico State as a scrimmage just because it's a New Mexico State, if we're being honest. So it is what it is. But it's I'm wondering how much Singleton will be used. I think he's earned the right to be used a lot. I think he's had a really good camp, and he's finally blossomed into himself. And you started to see it a little bit last year, right? He had that one big game where I think it was a scheme thing that they knew that his skill set could help a lot. I forget which game it was, but that they made it a point for him to be big during that game, and he's never really looked back from that. So it's good to see Sam kind of finally coming into his own. I'm very interested. If it's I think the last thing we want to see is all 3 get equal carries. I think everybody agrees with that. I do think to start, I feel like New Mexico State, you'll see a lot of Chroma and Singleton just because of Wisner missing time. But that's been probably the biggest topic to cover this offseason. And no one, this is where us not being in practice anymore and all that kind of stuff, we don't have context to give. We'll find out when everyone else finds out. It's been very tough to judge, and not that they've been dodgy with it. I mean, Mike Norvell's always dodgy in press conferences. It is what it is, but it's it's been tough to get a hold on what that rotation will be. But I agree that I think you need Chroma to be that bell cow.
I just agree on the usage part. You look at last year between pretty much a 4-man rotation, and we can go into the Roydell Williams saga the last 2 seasons at Florida State. But yeah, no one wants to talk about that. But you can't be taking carries away from Chroma if he is this athlete that everyone says he is. I think it's interesting with Wisner because you look at 2 years ago when he's sharing time for the most part with Jaden Blue. He has 1,000 all-purpose yards. Last year, he takes a step back. He doesn't even lead the team in rushing. So where is he at this point in his college career? Like when he came, I know in his intro press conference, he said he is okay with a role in terms of helping Chroma work into the kinks of being a bell cow back, being the guy in the backfield. So hopefully, I know with the injury, Chroma's pretty much taken that next step, but we'll see what the usage is like. I just don't want to see, both guys getting 10, 12 carries a game. You got to have a bell cow because I'm just a very strong believer in like running back by committee usually doesn't work.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It's just and also like you have to play the hot hand. I think that was the bad part from last year. It was weird because you never played the hot hand. Like Keziah Holmes always seemed to be in the doghouse, even though he finally have a good game, and then he's just right back on the bench for the 3 rest of the quarters of the game. Like it just made no sense. So as long as if there's a rotation and it makes sense, like it's. Wisner clearly has the hot hand that game, and he's clearly the one running the ball better, and Chrome was just a little off. I'm fine with him getting more carries that game then. Just let's play the hot hand more than just, okay, you had 2 good runs, and you're sitting on the bench the rest of the game.
I was going to say, I think my takeaway is, and I think it's a very positive thing, is you feel like you can't really go wrong. I think there's some weird dynamics with, especially, and you hate to talk about this, but like with money, it's like you're paying Trey Wisner a lot more than you're paying Sam Singleton. I agree that against New Mexico State, you'll probably see more of Singleton because of the way that camp has gone and with Wisner being hurt. But throughout the year, I agree. I mean, I think it'll fluctuate just depending on who has the high hand, and I don't really feel like you can go wrong.
I think with Wisner, too, one thing that if he doesn't pan out the way they were expecting that you lose is just the receiving threat and the opportunity. I know, Cole, you and I were talking about the opportunity to have like 2 running backs in the game at the same time. You got Wisner as more of a receiving threat, have Chroma in the game there. I think that could be something. Not that Chroma and Singleton wouldn't, be serviceable in that department, but that was going to be a big advantage there for them. And on the by committee approach, I'm not, strictly against running back by committee like it sounds like you are, Cole, but I just think, last year there were like 5 different guys, and guys would just disappear at times. Like you would just.
I mean, Keziah Holmes.
Yeah,
it was insane.
It's like a roller coaster.
It was crazy.
Up
he
and
would
down.
come in for 2 games. He would get like 30 yards on 2 carries and disappear.
Yeah, he'd have a fumble, and then he would just be like, "Oh, you're not going back."
It was crazy.
I go back to that Pitt game when he had the fumble early in the second half, and it pretty much turned the entire momentum of the game. And it was, I mean, I don't want to get into that game, but just
this is 2026.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
But I do agree. Let's see some 2 back sets. Why not bring out Wisner and Chroma at the same time? Like,
And
what's the harm in that?
Chroma is a very good receiving back. Like coming out of high school, that was one of the things that was really big with him in the Norvell offense. If you look at Norvell's play calling in the past, he loves the screens, right? And Chroma is built for that. He's very good at that. Physical guy was one of the strengths of his game coming out of high school. So that's one of the things that you really want to take advantage of. By the way, it's going to sound a little weird, but have y'all seen Chroma's legs and like how they're shaped? They're like bowed. It's nuts. Like the dude's nuts.
Well, that's another thing. With money, you're paying him a lot, but that dude's a beast. Everything that everybody has said, they'll ask the defensive staff members about guys that stand out on offense, and it's like that Chroma guy is just different.
And you saw it last year, like for how much mass and weight he has, like he is still very shifty. He's great at finding holes. He's a downhill runner. Like it's the ideal running back that you would want for a team that, obviously you have great wide receivers, but I think if the running game can set up the passing game, and you can incorporate a lot more play action, it's not only going to help the offensive line, it's going to help Ashton Daniels as well be able to diagnose the defense and everything. And that's where I think you might see a lot of success this season. If the running game is working early, this offense could be a lot more dangerous.
For sure. I think moving on to one of the lesser-known position groups on the team, tight ends. This one is interesting because I feel like there's been a lot of just weirdness with that position group the last couple of years. I mean, there was the whole Kyle Morlock shenanigans, and Landon Thomas has been around, but he's just been up and down. So they bring in my best in that group is East Carolina transfer to Serial Riles. They've talked a good bit about him. They feel confident in him. My favorite is Landon Thomas. I think they mentioned this is the first offseason with spring and fall that he's been fully healthy. I mean, he's really struggled with that in his first 2 years. And then I also threw Chase Lofton in there. I mean, obviously I went with Matt. We only got to see a few days of fall camp, but just watching him move, he's a big guy and he can move for his size. I feel like there's a place for him in this offense where he can be utilized.
And I think you look at tight end in general, it's a very versatile position in the Norvell offense. You can use them all over the place. That's why a guy like Jaheim Bell and Randy Pittman had some injuries, but we're truly going to thrive in this offense, right? So you can, and especially with the different types they have, you can really use them however you want. Chris Thompson even said, this was right at the beginning of camp, probably second day, like if you want to be in an offense as a tight end, like this is the offense you want to be in. It is weird because we haven't heard a whole lot about them. If you look at press conferences and stuff like that, and that could be a product of we got the tight ends coach the first week. I was thinking about that the other day. Like maybe that's why we haven't heard about them, just because we talked about them the second day, and that's tight end day. That's that. But Landon Thomas, I do think that this offseason is big for him, or was big for him, just because, as you said, he has been hurt and going into. I don't think he has started a fall camp healthy until this year. I think this was the first time that's happened, and that's huge. That's a lot of. When you go into development, fall camp is huge for development because you think about it like this. You don't have classes. You don't have anything. It's all football all day, all the time. You go to practice in the morning. Maybe you go have lunch. Maybe you go home for a little bit, but then you come right back. You have meetings, and then you go to a walkthrough. So you're in the building, we'll say 20 out of 24 hours of the day. If you're, for the most part, you're home for an hour that you're not sleeping at night. So it's this camp, and again, this is one of those that we'll have to see it when we see him out there. This camp should be huge for him. If it's a put up or shut up year for Landon Thomas, that if he doesn't have a good year, you wonder if he ever will, right? Because this was the only time he's had that chance to develop.
I think he has the most upside out of the three you named, but like you said, he's been struggling with injuries. He last year with Randy Pittman, he kind of got shoved down on that depth chart, and wasn't his fault necessarily. But this is another scenario with they bring in Desiree Riles. I want to mention though, Desiree Riles 6'3", 235. Randy Pittman is 6'2", 240. So it's literally pretty much the same mold. Like Norvell might have a type at tight end. So I'm excited because Randy Pittman was more. He was so valuable in the blocking game. That's what made the offense click with him blocking, but also with his hands. I don't know if they're going to put Desiree Riles in that same role. And I know we talked a lot about like 2 running back set, but why not run 12 personnel? Why not get both those guys out there? I know there's not enough players on the offensive side of the ball. Like there's only 11 guys that can play at once. You can't get all these guys on the field at once, but why not see what you got? Like they have so many chess pieces, plug in, plug out, see what you've got. I love Landon Thomas. Will and I talked about it. Like just one of my personal favorite Florida State players of the last 2 seasons. I just want to see him get his chance. And with the word that is coming out of fall camp about him, I'm more excited. I just think like a guy like Chase Lofton, he's going to be on that Landon Thomas role where he's going to get a little bit more shoved down on that depth chart. I wouldn't expect to see him a ton, but he's also only a sophomore. Like he's got, if he sticks around, he's going to get his chance. But Landon Thomas, if we get to the depth chart eventually, I wouldn't be surprised to see it like week 2, week 3. He's the starting tight end. Desiree Riles is that. We can go back to those 2 big bold letters in OR.
I think you're going to see that come Monday. Yeah. If they release a depth chart, maybe they won't this year, but I think I expect that to come on Monday.
Yeah, with Landon Thomas, I agree with you, Cole. I mean, just the flashes, the Pitt game last year, the Clemson game his first year, like he's shown moments that have made me wonder multiple times, like, wow, why haven't we really heard a thing from him in like 3 or 4 games sometimes? So I would be optimistic, and I agree that Riles is going to fit that same sort of Randy Pittman role there. And they have some good, freshmen they brought in the last recruiting class at tight end too. So I think depth-wise, that position has, for the future, not bringing into consideration whether players could leave based on whatever else happens, but they're set up pretty well there.
Yeah, and Tiller, one of the guys who came in from high school, he didn't come in until the summer, but he's one of those that's had a really good standout camp and is one of those that we have heard of on an off non-tight end day a lot. So that's another one to watch. And I like Corbin Fordham as well at FSU Legacy. His dad played offensive line here. So, yeah, the depth of that position. Chris Thompson has recruited very, very well at tight end.
Regarding the depth chart, I have Riles, number 1. Is that – I mean, I agree. I think Cole mentioned it. It's like I think him and Landon Thomas will play a little bit of different roles. I think Riles will play a bigger role in the blocking game. So I feel like you could see both of them on the field at the same time.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, for maybe the biggest question on the entire team, I think going into fall camp, it might have been defensive line. As for me, I think going into the game week, it's now the offensive line for me. Will, do you want to get started with your offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you can kind of only guess at certain spots. Xavier Chaplin is pretty much going to be the left tackle. That seems to be defined. Same with Braden Welch-Joyner at center. Paul Bowling, it sounds like, is getting a lot of the buzz at left guard right now, with Andre Otto maybe falling out of that rotation a little bit more. I don't know. I mean, Nate Pabst, it sounds like they want more at guard. I've seen him listed at tackle some other places, and then Chimita, I guess it's good as mine on the pronunciation on that one, but it seems to be, I have him slotted at right tackle. I know Jonathan Daniels has been talked about as a guy who has impressed as well, just listening to Herb Hand talk, but it feels like they still don't fully know, or maybe they're just given the image of that, but who's going to fit into the rotation there?
Yeah, I do think it's been pretty consistent, left to right being Chaplin, Otto, Brandon Welsh-Joyner, Pabst, and then Chimdia. But yeah, that left guard has been a little bit up for grabs this past week, I would say. Norvell, it was weird because we hadn't heard about him all camp, and then the last week, all you hear is Paul Bowling, and he was rotating in with Otto from what I've heard a little bit. Now, Otto was a little banged up, so it's probably of a byproduct of that, but Norvell also said he was pushing for a starting role there. So that's the most interesting one. From what I've heard, they're going to rotate up until game week, so here in a couple days. So we'll kind of see what happens. To start, I would think Otto. I would be surprised if Otto lost the job at this point. I just feel like it's too late, right? Like they've worked in as offensive line. It's all about reps with the same five over and over and over again. And to make a change that last second feels weird. I wouldn't be surprised to see it. There is buzz there, but I do think it's Otto's job to lose still, if that makes sense. It's been a kind of a weird thing to follow, and it kind of came out of nowhere in the last week.
Well, especially when you're bringing in a group of all new guys, besides Otto, who was here before, but all guys who haven't played before. That time spent together is even more important on a line like that.
Yeah, and it's also, I'll give you the floor in a second, Cole. Sorry, I saw you breathe. What kind of, this is what I'm also thinking, like if Otto doesn't start, what kind of message does that send as you've challenged that guy to be a leader? You can't, let's be honest, you can't be a leader if you're not starting, especially at a position where you shouldn't rotate a lot. So that's my issue with it as well, that I think you're sending a bad message if he doesn't start.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I think consistency is the biggest thing because like you just mentioned, you have 5 guys that are going to start that really have no experience starting at FSU besides Otto, who I think he has 2 or 3 starts under his belt from last season. So you have 5 guys. It's a brand new offensive line. In the last 2 seasons, they've pretty much did the same thing, and it hasn't worked out. So this is the one position on the team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. For me, it's like there's just so many question marks going into the season. Like if and when they release this depth chart, whoever the starting 5 is, like I just hope it's consistent at least through the first 2-3 weeks, and they can kind of gel together and build this chemistry because that's the most important thing on the offensive line. So I just hope that they're building. And Herb Hand from his press conference yesterday sounded pretty confident about what they're doing now at this point at camp. So trust in him, I guess, although the product hasn't looked fantastic. Like last year, I mean, it was a disaster. So it's like
the offensive line was good last year. It was like one of the bright spots.
I thought it was serviceable.
It was definitely better than 2024 for sure.
Anything
major step up.
So maybe both years are just mending together. Yeah. So I'm thinking about that. But I just maybe trust in Herb Hand, trust in him getting this unit prepared. Whatever 5 he rolls out, I'm sure they're going to be ready to go. And also, I don't think we're talking about it enough. The fact that this team is starting with New Mexico State is gonna pay dividends for them. Like if they started at home against SMU or in a big game like they did last season, I don't know what the expectation would be, but since you pretty much have a week to prepare for a team like New Mexico State, and then after that you have over a week to prepare for a ranked opponent coming into your house, I think that's going to bode very well, especially for a position group like the offensive line.
Right. I mean, you guys talked a little bit about the chemistry. I think that's one thing that Herb Hand, and honestly a lot of position coaches on this team have talked about this offseason, but especially with the offensive line, they weren't healthy last year, like going into the season. There were lots of questions from Herb Hand, from the entire offense, just about how they would mesh together, right? Because you're bringing in 4 or 5 guys that have never played football together at a position where that's really important. I think if there's one positive or like silver lining with this offensive line this offseason, they've all been healthy through spring and through all of fall. So depending on how it shakes up, hopefully either way, they will have spent enough time together and played together enough that it works. Yeah, I mean, because last year it wasn't horrible. It was serviceable. Now, there were other problems, I feel like, that were worse, so I feel like it worked
things
out
that
okay.
make it look worse.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't think,
right.
Having a quarterback who can move helps when you have a bad line. It can actually kind of make a good line look a little bit worse in a way. So I think there were things like that. But yeah, I think Herb Hand overall, at least I would trust him as a coach to put a higher floor on a line than maybe in some other places. So I don't expect this group to be, like we mentioned, 2024 level disastrous, but I mean, a step back certainly wouldn't be crazy.
I do think the season hinges on that group, though. Cause we talk about all the skill positions. The skill positions are insane, right? We could say, not insane, but, they're pretty good. Compared to everyone else in the country, you expect to have good running backs, good receivers. You don't need a great quarterback with that, but you need a good offensive line. So as long as they're serviceable, I think it's going to be a pretty big deal. Whether if they're awful and closer to the 2024 side, you're going to have a lot of issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks for itself. Regarding the depth chart, we talked about it a little bit. Left tackle, Chaplin, secure. Left guard, who do you think's getting the start against New Mexico State?
If I would bet on Otto.
I'll defer to the intel there and go with Otto.
Yeah,
Same here.
and then with center, this one's interesting. I mean, Welch Joyner is gonna play. I think it's great to have Sandman, a guy that you actually feel confident. I mean, I think it's been a long time at FSU since there was a backup center that you actually felt confident in. I think that's great for the program because you brought him in. He's not a transfer, to have a guy that you're bringing in that you're actually confident about at backup center. But Welch Joyner is going to start. They've talked about how they want Paps at right guard. Assuming they're healthy, that's what they're going to go with. And then at tackle, Chimdia, is it Nwawu? Does anyone know?
Sure. Just call him Wee Woo. It's
something like that.
Or I've heard a lot of people on the team just refer to him as Chim, so that's what I've been going with. I'm not touching that last name.
Right. But so we feel pretty good about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moving to the other side of the ball. Again, mentioned the offensive line is a make or break position. I think defensive line is similar. My best, and this is kind of funny, my best is Mandrell this year. He had a great year last year. They're expecting huge things from him. My favorite is Darryl this year because I feel like he's kind of flying under the radar, and from what we've heard from coaches and other players, he may be the more vocal of the two, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting because because Darryl was actually the higher rated out of high school. It was always they were always a package deal, and it was pretty clear. But I think why Florida State didn't take him at first, because if you remember, they were committed to UCF at first, and then Gus came, and even though it was more of a Randy Shannon pickup, which is interesting, that was his leaving gift to Florida State was the Desir twins. That's a pretty good one. But it's he was the higher rated of the two, and it's interesting how it's worked out. But yeah, Darryl, there was we heard from people who were out of practice, an NFL scout who thought that Darryl's actually the first round talent, which is very interesting to hear. You don't know. I mean, look, they're twins. They're the same genetics, right? How different can they be? So it'll be interesting. But I agree with you on that. I think he'll play a bigger role in that. My issue with Mandrell is that, you had Darryl Jackson to rely on last year. So how much does that change? Because now you don't have someone getting doubled and you can benefit off of that. That's my only worry with him, but I do still think he'll be pretty good.
So, yeah, I agree with the fact that I think Darryl is flying completely under the radar because everyone is just expecting Mandrell Desir to have this stellar season and be the guy on the Florida State defensive line. But I'm a part of the camp that doesn't really know what to expect from Darryl Desir. If he's going to get a ton of playing time, at what position, who knows. I like Kevin Wynn just because of, I think the word out of camp about him has been really good. But that video that came out of him rowing probably about 600 pounds, and I think there was a coach that was standing on top of it. That's just something that fires me up personally. Something that it's okay, this guy might be good. He might be super strong. Obviously, redshirted last season, a 4-star coming out of Georgia, so he has all the talent in the world. Are you hearing much about him? How's he looking in camp?
It's an interesting one. I think the depth of the defensive line definitely hinges on him because he's probably not going to start. But it's a big deal whether or not he does good. It's been on and off with him. Whenever the coaches talk about him, it's been really good. We'll kind of see. It's one of those where I need to see it. I don't really know on him. But, yeah, you're right. The workout videos have been awesome. He lost what? Spoon, you were there. Was it 40 pounds?
Something like that. Well,
yeah.
I was going to say, regarding the coach's comments, it's mostly been what he has done, bigger picture, I feel like. So from last year, obviously, and then through spring, and then now into fall, he lost 40 pounds. He's bought in, he's committed, he's doing this and that. It hasn't so much been he made a big play in the scrimmage or he killed it in today's practice. So I agree with Matt. It is more we'll have to see. But everything that you hear, this is what these are the guys that change programs, the huge recruits that you had to fight, big programs off to keep, you had to pay them a lot of money. Everything that you hear is that, Darryl Jackson, it's he's country strong, he's just a different kind of guy. I agree. I think his development is huge. If he can even slightly play a Darrell Jackson role, where he's just eating up, offensive line. Like that's big.
And what you do need to watch for in that area is Deontay McCray. He put on a lot of weight, and so he'll be playing more inside. So it's a kind of an opposite there. But I think that's one that's really need to look. And then you go to Daniel Lyons of like, what is Daniel Lyons? We know Daniel Lyons hasn't been that good. Let's be honest, right? Like he's been good, but not great. And it's one of those where he also needs to have a big year for this defensive line to be good. It's interesting because the coaches were hyping him up when he came in. I think he is improved, but he needs to, like he's always been the shadow of somebody, whether it was Darrell Jackson or Josh Farmer, or you just go down the list. And now it's finally his turn to be the guy. How will he do? That's a big question mark for me, but I do like Deontay McCray. I think he's one that will have a good year. That's one I'm very high on. And then the biggest thing also with the defensive line is, and now this could leak into the linebackers a little bit, but the jack position actually being used as a jack position, which it really wasn't last year because they didn't have the right personnel for that. And part of that is like this being Tony White's second year getting the right guys in for that defense. But like a Rylan Kennedy and a Jalen Anderson actually being there and being able to set the edge, because that was a big issue last year, will also help with all of this. Yeah,
Rylan Kennedy was a guy that I was looking at as a potential favorite. I just think if he can pan out, that could be a game-changing thing for FSU defensively. I mean, like you said, Matt, FSU didn't have that sort of presence last year, so that's a name that I would continue to watch. And yeah, I think just the depth, while maybe again it's not at a crazy place, I think you have multiple guys on the bench you feel comfortable rotating in a way that at times hasn't really panned out in the past. So I'm optimistic about the defensive line, maybe a little more so than some others.
And I wonder if there's going to be a bigger rotation like there was last season. I think the biggest thing is these guys that are returning. I mean, you have all these returners. We didn't talk about Diamante Diggs, but you have the Desir twins, you have Kevin Wynn, you have Daniel Lyons, you have Deontay McCray. All those guys should know this defense by now. So coming in second year in the system, at least up front, if there is a bigger rotation, they should know their job. They should know the scheme, the defense, much better than they did last year. So I think that bodes well, not only for the depth, but also for the talent and the performance of these guys who are coming in for their second year in the system.
With the depth chart, and Matt mentioned this, like Tony White's defense makes this really hard to piece together because there aren't really, this guy's a defensive tackle, this guy's a defensive end. Even last year, like a guy like Deontay McCray, it's like, where do you put him? He doesn't really have an exact position. So with the interior, we feel like Daniel Lyons will get the
him and
McCray,
yeah.
And then, I mean, what does that even look like on the outside? Because you feel like Rylan Kennedy and Jalen Anderson are going to be your those jack.
So they'll be put as
rushers.
The jack, and you look at the depth chart that they put out like last year, the format of it. They'll be as jack, and then you probably put the Desirs on each end, is my guess, with Diggs in there as well. But yeah, it's the depth, quote unquote depth chart for the defensive line is impossible just to figure out. Like you kind of, it's not a guess. You know which guys are going to be inside and which guys will be outside. But there's so much switching. It's really truly hard to determine. Those are your guys that you're going to look at. McCray, Daniel Lyons in the middle, Kevin Wynn, Desirs will rotate in and out of that, but probably be more DNs. That's why I see in recruiting, you see there's a lot of edge rushers that they bring in because you have three spots for them, right? You have two DNs and the jack. So it's you have a lot of those edge type of guys.
Where does Jordan Sanders fit into this?
Well, he was banged up in the spring, so he missed all spring. He's probably right after that. That's an interesting one because you'll kind of, again, I have no clue what we're going to get from him, right? Because he was hurt and then he transferred from Texas State, so he's going up a level. Before that, he was at Cal Poly, so he's hasn't really ever been at this level. Was kind of a later add in the portal. It was one of those I think you were waiting to see what the Desir twins were doing before you went full out, and then you did grab them. That's a weird one. Not one we've heard a whole lot about this camp either.
This position group I think is so interesting because I remember in January when the Desir twins were still in the portal, and I don't think Kevin Wynn entered the portal.
He tried to.
Right. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, what? Like where are we? I mean, that position group was just gone at that time of the year, and now you look up 8 months later, and I think it's definitely in a much better spot because you kept the Desirs, which is huge. And I think they're the cornerstone. You're expecting them to take. I mean, Mandrell was an All-American, a freshman All-American. Defensive lineman at FSU, that's pretty impressive, right? You're expecting them to have huge seasons. I do feel like they're the difference makers there, and then everything else just has to be good enough. I agree with Will. I think Rylan Kennedy, everything that they say, just he's a physical specimen in the way that he moves, and at Texas A&M he wasn't really doing what he wanted to do. Based on what I've heard, they were using him more as a linebacker, more in coverage, and they're hoping he can just be a true pass rusher.
Yeah, him and don't forget Jalen Anderson. I think
right.
he'll be very good out of the JUCO level too. He's my guy. If we're putting sleeper for defensive line, I'll put Jalen Anderson as my guy.
And if you just watch the tape that Ryland Kennedy put on film last year from Texas A&M, I think the most speed out of this room for sure. But like you just said, I mean, just a specimen. So if he could fit into this jack role and do something that he wants to do, and that's why I feel confident in Tony White that he's going to find a guy like that. And Will and I talked about it. Like, is Ryland Kennedy a good player, or is he coming from a good program? So it makes people think he's a better player than he actually is. Who knows? But like you just gotta, I think, trust Tony White in this situation. Like, he's gonna put his best players in their best positions, if that makes sense. Like, he's gonna find a place for a guy like Ryland Kennedy if he is this player that everyone says he is.
Playing behind that defensive line, very complimentary, or I guess they could hurt each other kind of situation. The linebackers. This is a position group that this fall has been huge in terms of my confidence. Just hearing, especially about who is my best player in this group, Chris Jones. I feel like he could fit every measure that we have on this chart. I think he's the best. He's my favorite. I think he's also a sleeper in that if he is as good as everyone says he is, he will be huge for this defense.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I mean, any shows that I've been on recently previewing Florida State, he's been really the first name, certainly on defense, that I've brought up there. I think he could be that sort of game changer. You look at the linebacker room the last 2 years, it's been the worst position group defensively, easily. I mean, you've just not gotten, and you've put a lot of guys out there who maybe are fine players, a few of which who are still on the team, but they've been forced to just do too much. You haven't had a guy like Chris Jones, who I think can be just a major factor in why this defense could turn it around this year. And then I think around him, you've got guys like Mekhi Bayor, you've got Caleb Volley, who I know, Cole, you brought up when we talked about a week ago. And then obviously Blake Nicholson and Omar Graham coming back, who, when they were kind of forced to be linebacker one in that role, it didn't go maybe as you would have liked. But as more rotational guys, especially with Nicholson, a guy who's shown continual improvement, I don't mind the sound of that either. So I think in terms of flipping the script from last year, linebackers probably at the top of the list. I mean, Lavallee was hurt. You didn't even get to see him last year, and they were really excited about that acquisition when they made it. So I think this position group could go from being easily the weakness of the defense to, it's not out of the question to say it could end up being the strength.
When you have a guy like Chris Jones, who one of the biggest things, and you and I talked about this, was can these guys that they get from these smaller schools make the jump to D1? We just talked about it with Jordan Sanders. Chris Jones is another good example. Nehemiah Chandler as well. But Chris Jones is out of those guys I mentioned, or any of those guys that you're kind of worried about making that jump. I think Chris Jones is the most likely to be able to replicate his production from Southern Miss. And when you have a guy that is such a strong voice, such a strong, center of that defense, then you can anchor him with a guy like Caleb Lavelle, Blake Nicholson. You can get those guys more playing time. I mean, Caleb Lavelle, I'm high on him just because they were really fired up about when they got him, and he was injured. He was playing special teams. Now I think there's more of a role for a guy like him. I would like to see more rotation besides Chris Jones, but along with him, like, you can pretty much, it's chess again. Plug guys in, plug guys out, see what you got. And that's why, going back to that New Mexico State game, like Omar Graham, that's another guy. It's like Daniel Lyons, like, what is he? What is Omar Graham? Like, I just think the linebackers in general last year were a pretty weak spot. So I think him and Nicholson just get grouped into that. But I just don't know what to expect from him to sit here confidently and say that he can be an impact on the defensive side of the ball.
He was the number one ranked linebacker in the portal when he
Really?
was in it for some reason. No one knows why. But he was the number one ranked linebacker in the portal when he tried to enter for the second year in a row. Well, he did enter, and then he came back pretty quietly. But Chris Jones, the biggest piece in that room. It's also like Ernie Sims leading that room now and being the actual linebackers coach and not the assistant, I think is huge. He clearly brings a different intensity than they've had in the past, and it's and he even said that he said that was something that he didn't like when he first got here a couple years ago. So I think that's been a big thing. As for a sleeper, a name y'all haven't mentioned, Isaiah Williams, who was at one point he was the number one linebacker coming out of high school. He was impressing until he got banged up, had a little bit of a scare in that first scrimmage. But I think he'll be okay. From everything I've heard, he'll be okay and he'll be back. I think they're going to try to I think him himself was trying to go too quick into it. He tore his ACL in hhigh school. So it was just like probably needs to be a little bit more gingerly on it to start, and that's good for New Mexico State, stuff like that. Because if you put him in full go, he's going to go full go. And Isaiah is the like we talked about Chris Jones, except younger, of a guy that's what it's supposed to look like when it comes to linebackers. And when you talk about the best linebackers, you go to the depth chart. It's definitely Chris Jones, Caleb LaValle or Isaiah Williams, and then Mekhi Bayer, who's an interesting one, also banged up. But he knows the Tony White defense because he's played it for like 3 years. So that's a good person to have in that room. And that room has a chance. And Caleb even said it when he spoke to the media. It was this week that like he thinks they have the most talented room, which is saying something when you go up against the running backs or the receivers. He thinks they have the most talented room. And it feels like it's been night and day from years past when it comes to that room, just on the intensity of people actually being linebackers, right? Like real want to go out and hit and kill you and take the soul out of you linebackers. Like that's something we haven't had since maybe Tatum Bethune and Kalen DeLoach, it feels like. And again, since then is Omar Graham and Blake Nicholson. So it's tough to see. Blake, they've said, has improved. Omar hasn't been a name that has come up as much this camp, and we'll kind of see how it goes. But I agree with you. He can be better. Probably don't want them as starters. You want your starters probably Chris Jones, Caleb, and Bayer. And then after that, you can rotate in to keep him fresh. But Chris Jones, man, so one thing people don't want to talk about is, he technically, remember that whole thing with Clemson and the guy going to Ole Miss, the linebacker and all that? Chris Jones technically started that chain reaction by flipping from Ole Miss to Florida State out of the portal, which is kind of funny to think about. But yeah, that was a huge pickup. You think if Florida State didn't get him and didn't pull that off, this linebacker room is completely different, and you don't really know what you're getting.
I feel like the last few years, you haven't even been able to manufacture enthusiasm about the linebacker room. Like there was no projection of like, oh, if these guys hit this point, like it was just like, well, hopefully it's not too bad. Yeah. I mean, I remember 2024 when Justin Cryer came in and just kind of looked like he cared, and it was like, oh, that's great. Like that, it was that lacking in that room. So yeah, the turnaround has been great, and I think Sims is definitely a name to attribute that to, and how well he's done since taking over fully.
I was going to say I'll go back and reference the same media session that Matt mentioned with LaValle and Ernie Sims. I think just this week alone, hearing him, that man, he's different. I mean, there's a reason he's like literally one of the highest rated recruits of all time, and was a first round draft pick. I think him combined with Chris Jones, just in terms of the mentality, and that's something with under Randy Shannon and Papuchis, I don't know how much talent was in those rooms generally, but it also just it was not those linebackers of old. I mean, truthfully, FSU, it's hard to get better in terms of history of having some of the best linebackers in college football, and it just was not living up to that at all. I think Chris Jones especially, and many position groups around the team, and Usman Kroma has talked about it. I don't know if I saw it live when we went to practice, that hit when they were doing pass pro drills, and Kroma has to block Chris Jones, and Jones just hits him. And I was scared for a second because Kroma goes off to the side and he throws his helmet on the ground, and he's and he's upset. And then he speaks to the media the next week and he's like, I love that. That's what we need. That's what this team needs. And he's right. I mean, I feel like that's been missing, is just this level of physicality in situations in practice, because you can't tackle all the time. It's hard to build physicality, but doing it in any way you can. A guy like Chris Jones is a program changer. Behind the linebackers is the defensive backs. And this one is a little bit weird because I grouped safeties and corners in the same group. I think really it's 1 and 2 in both of those rooms. I have Jabril Rawls as the best. Maybe you could argue he's the best player on this whole defense. I think, he represented the team at Media Day. Everybody knows it. If you go around and ask FSU students players that they know on the team, I'm sure he'll probably be in the top, 3 or 4. And then my favorite is Ashlyn Barker, who's going to be playing the Rover safety in this year's defense. He's replacing Earl Little. All the talk about him has been excellent. They're really excited about him.
And you go all the way back to Tour of Duty when they grade you each workout, and you get whatever jersey the next workout of, like the blue turquoise game jersey being the highest level, perfect 10 out of 10. The defensive coaches were pretty hard on their guys with that this year. Not many of them got him, but Barker was one of the guys to get him. So that was huge, and that kind of set the tone for Barker the rest of the offseason. And he's Evan Cooper said it once. He the metal parts of the bonsai tree. He was like, I cut it off and finally let him grow. And it's that's been a fun one to watch too, because he came out of JUCO from Iowa. I think it was Iowa Western, And, he was here for the undefeated season, and it's kind of been quiet, and he's gotten a lot more work over the last few years, and now is finally his time to be that guy, right? When you looked at it, you lost Earl Little at that spot, but they felt confident, and I think it came down to a price thing of, like, which would you rather, get more safeties, or you pay Earl Little, or are you confident, like, Barker could play that role? And they were confident Barker could play that role, and he's stepped up and been a leader for him. Other safeties, Jones, Duke transfer, and Richard, who was an Illinois State transfer, making that jump, which is a scary jump, as we've said throughout this already with a couple guys. But it's I think that from everything they say about him, he's been good. He's a physical guy, quiet guy, which is why I don't think we've heard a whole lot about him outside of that, but he's been one they're also excited about. I think that safety group has cemented themselves, and yeah, Rawls is Rawls. The only really question with that secondary is who's going to start on the other corner side. Is it going to be Q, Quindarius Jones, or Nehemiah Chandler? When they recruited Nehemiah Chandler out of the portal, they told him he was going to start on the other side of Riles. I'm leaning more towards Q starting there right now. I think from everything you hear the coaches talk about, I would be pretty surprised if it wasn't Q at this point. But it's always, with DBs, you want to rotate out a ton, right? Like, that's not one you want them to be out there a whole series, stuff like that, because you are running up and down the field and it gets tiring, right? So I think it's good to have that depth there. And that's, again, one of the strengths of this team. And it's, when you do this exercise and you go position by position, you start to go like, well, this team's really not that bad. Like, if everything goes as, like, not even best case scenario, like, even is just, like, below that, you're not looking terrible. Like, it's not like everyone made this whole offseason because of the coaching, hot seat, all that kind of stuff, which is completely valid. But you go position by position, you're like, there is some talent there.
Yeah, and safety's another area with Barker. I would agree Barker is my pick for favorite there. You haven't really had a standout guy, and correct me if I'm missing anybody, but since Jamie Robinson left at that spot, corner, obviously, you've had guys like Green and Thomas and Cypress there, but I think Barker, just how vocal he's been from the sound of it, too, I think that's going to be a major impact. And yeah, I agree, this secondary, another group where the floor feels pretty high, I think, with the depth and the competition they've had, even with Carson Hobbs going down exactly like 30 minutes after Cole brought him up on the show we were doing as a sleeper pick. But, I think this group, I don't see much of a reason to worry that, you're going to get a few weeks and be like, wow, that FSU secondary has really just sank this team. I don't feel like that's any sort of possibility there.
I cannot believe you just got through talking about the secondary without bringing up Charles Lester.
Yeah, no, I his name was on the list at the bottom there. I saw it, but you got anything there?
I had written on my doc, ask Will about Charles Lester. So I was interested. I was waiting.
Brought him
up
when we were talking. When we were talking, I was just like, yeah, is this the year that he does anything? I don't know.
And is it?
I don't know.
You got anything on that?
He's been better, right? He's had a couple picks this camp, so he's getting better. That's another guy. That whole, you look back at that DB class, like 2024, like it's a big put up or shut up year for that class because you have him and Jamari Howard too, who has also been behind and it's dealt with some injuries. Lester, yeah, it's another one of the kind of have to see what happens. Maybe see what he does against New Mexico State. He's not in that top three group that we talk about of Rawls, Nehemiah, and Q. But it definitely like someone who, if he emerges, this secondary, again, sky's the limit for him. It's definitely a group that you're not worried about. But yeah, Charles Lester's, I need to believe it to see it. Because he also played a lot when he was a freshman. Well, not a lot, but he was here that 2 and 10 year, and he got chances to play. Was it Free the Youngins? Was that the thing that year?
Something like that.
Yeah, and yeah, we'll see. That's a we'll see situation for me.
Is KJ Kirkland?
I was also going to throw him out there as well. They talked to him in Jacksonville, I think. Like the media spoke with him, and one of the things that he has talked about, and then Barker definitely touched on too, is like what we've heard is that group is super close, and they hold each other to a high standard. Which that's why there's these intangible things that you kind of feel like they say every offseason. It's like, oh, we like each other, and this group is locked in and whatever, which you can't really know until the season starts. But the coaches and the players, especially the ones that were on the team last year, repeatedly have been like, listen, we like each other more. We're more locked in. This is better than last year's team. And I think Kirkland is a guy that can represent that. And then he's gotten, he's played. He's a senior. He's gotten chances. But I feel like this could be a season where he plays and you're actually like, that Kirkland guy is pretty good.
I agree. He's had a good camp as well. I think that whole group has had a really good camp. KJ's, he might I can't remember. He might have been one. I talk about the blue jersey and tour of duty. I think he might have been one of the few to get one too, if I remember correctly. If not, he was close. But it's that whole group is very, very solid. And I think they really, be honest about it, they really recruited over KJ Kirkland with the guys they got in the portal, and he's responded very well to that. And being a guy that you can't keep out of the rotation now, right? Because he's a leader. You got a lot of it's not something you see in a portal era, and especially on this team, you haven't seen a lot of homegrown guys, but they've kind of started to be the glue, especially for this team. When you go to Rawls, who's never left and been a Seminole the whole time, same with KJ, same with Barker. So it's kind of cool to see those guys come up and be one of those few guys who are true blood Seminole and will die for that logo and do whatever. And it sets the tone for the rest of the group that we've seen, that why they're so close, right? Those guys set the tone for it.
This is like the same, in my opinion, like they're in the same place as kind of the defensive line, where you have these returners. You have guys that are coming into their second year with Tony White that know the system more, know what's expected of them. We're also banking on the fact that Jabril Rawls and Ashton Barker are the guys in the secondary. Like, I just go back, like last season, Earl Little had a fantastic start to the season. I just remember sitting in the crowd watching him get torn up by Malachi Toney, and that might just speak more to Malachi Toney and his skill. But you can't have a guy like Jabril Rawls, like Earl Little last season, where you expect so much of them and they fall short. So if they can meet expectations, those two guys, everything else will fall into place. I really like Mekhi Jones coming over from Duke. He's got a little bit more size, which I think lacks almost in the secondary unit. A lot of the guys are a little bit more thin, not super tall, but that is more so that mold for a cornerback, so I'm not going to knock them for that. But we are expecting those two guys I mentioned, in Barker and Jabril Rawls, to be the guys. And if they're not, then we're looking in about 3-4 weeks and saying the secondary is not as good as we expected.
Right. Before we get to maybe the most important position, well, okay, not maybe, the most important position on the team, I don't know who cares, but special teams, we talked a little bit about Jason Lopez being probably the favorite to be the punt return man this season. I mean, is there any other points of interest?
Yeah, I mean, you get Daniel Hughes at punter. He's a fan favorite, right? And then Oklahoma State transfer Gabe Panikowski at kicker. Again, those are two positions where I don't know what's going to happen until we see it. I mean, when we spoke to the special teams coordinator, he did say Gabe went 4 for 4 that day, I think, so that's a good sign. But again, that's one of those where we really won't know anything. But yeah, it sounds like they have a lot of guys at punt returner, Jason Lopez obviously being the leader, but sounds like they're rotating everybody, like from Devin Carter to Boggs. But I think J-Rock will take that role.
Just piggybacking off of special teams, and I don't want to bring up any bad memories, but it's pretty insane to me that Jake Weinberg is most likely going to be the starting kicker at Miami this season with how bad he was last season. So, and I know he was a true freshman, but I think anything might be better than what you got with Jake Weinberg last season.
Well, they went and recruited Bert Auburn last offseason after he was terrible.
But he didn't kick for them last season.
No, but I think they were hoping that he would when they first went and got him, or there wasn't too much of a plan. And I mean, their kicking game didn't shape out too well anyways.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's always been a place, a position for them that has never been that great. But I think you could skip special teams, but you can't skip talking about special teams without talking about Daniel Hughes, just because he's Daniel Hughes. I have a lot of thoughts on him, but I just hope he's a good punter.
Have y'all tried to get him in here yet? I'm sure he'd do it. He does everything.
He does everything.
I was going to say, wasn't there an actual possibility?
That's been brought up, yeah. I feel like that would be really good clicks-wise. I think he would share that everywhere. So,
100%.
Yeah.
One of my writers, Hunter, talked to him last year, and it was right after I had a run-in with Daniel Hughes, and it was not the greatest experience. And I was on the fence. It's just about him as a person, not even a player. But and then Hunter was like, "Oh my God, the interview was fantastic." So that's that. I mean, we have two differing opinions, but apparently he's a nice guy. He's
nice.
Yeah, and
I mean, guess what
I
the
will
reaction was, but he was nice in this interview.
It
took a little bit to get it rolling.
Yeah, but like when he talked about his story, he sounds committed at the very least. Like, and when he walked in, I mean, it was funny because it was the kicker and then him. He's a big guy. Like for a punter, he's way bigger than I feel like a normal college punter.
Yeah, and I listened to that press conference the other day, and it does sound like he's locked in. I mean, everyone sees his Instagram reels, like that video of him punting the ball in slow-mo. That should fire everyone up. It's like that video of Kevin Wynn. Those are the two videos of the offseason. You have the Daniel Hughes slow-mo He rolls around with Andre Otto too, so they're both creating content. And then that video of Kevin Wynn, it's pick your own poison. You want to see a guy row 600 pounds after dropping 40 pounds of muscle or fat, or do you want to see a tattooed Australian punt a ball in the air? It's
slow-mo punt doesn't do too much for me, but I'll take your punt.
But
the music to it's nice.
And you notice like when he like films it, like you can't see the yard.
Yeah, you have no idea.
It's also always in 0.5.
Could have been like a 25-yard punt.
Like when I watched it, I'm watching it like 5 times. I'm like, I wonder how far this.
I mean, I know he didn't shank it, but I had no idea otherwise.
Well, I don't think you would really be able to tell because the angle. It's all about angles.
It's like when I post a golf video, no one knows where the ball goes.
Exactly,
but
you
it
can't
looks
see
good.
the ball.
Swing looks nice.
But I think now based off the Daniel Hughes video, when you record a golf video, maybe you get a nice camera out there and you go slow mo on the golf ball, just in
and
the
I'll
air,
put the same
though.
song to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Was it honorable? And yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, fine. Riveting special teams talk. Finally, we've reached Ashton Daniels, who we know is going to be the starting quarterback come New Mexico State. And we didn't know that initially in the spring. There was some controversy there. Cole, I remember the last time we talked about this, you mentioned it a little bit. I agree with what you said about how it was weird in the moment where you're like, you said it was going to be a competition, and then you're just like, never mind, Daniels got it, Sperry, who cares? But giving him time to really learn the offense and that personnel, I think over the summer and with this fall has been really helpful for him.
I agree. I could not agree with you more. Like at the time, I think both of us, Will included, I think we all were like, what is going on? Yeah. There's no competition. You name a starter before the summer starts, you're also taking out Malachi Marshall out of that equation before he gets on campus, which I guess now we're fine with. But the fact that he has had pretty much most of the spring, all of the summer, and now all of fall to work with the ones, work with the starters, be on the same page as his receivers. I mean, the things that Deuce Robinson has been saying about Ashton Daniels has made me want to buy in even more. The coaching staff, everyone is so high on him. I just feel like there was talk about, like, none of these guys are going to come out and say, like, oh, my God, Ashton, he hasn't looked good in practice. He's missing throws. He's not fast. His arm isn't great. They're going to come in and say great things. They're saying great things about him, but I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like, the things that were coming out about Tommy last year and DJU very early on in camp, they weren't, like, bad, but they weren't at this level, but it was still good. I just want to see it on the field. And I think most of the FSU fan base spent the summer, like, you're watching you're watching the tape, you're watching the video from him at Stanford, from him at Auburn, and, like, the turnovers are an issue, but I don't really know what to expect come game time. Like, I know he has a good arm. He's not as mobile as Tommy, but he still is mobile. I think it's going to be more of a reflection of the offensive line the first game, especially. But you said they need to be serviceable. You said when you have a great wide receiver unit, you have great running backs, you only need the quarterback to be so good. So if Ashton Daniels can do that, if he can be serviceable, even elevate the game, if he has a stronger arm than Tommy, like, he's not going to be running as much as Tommy. It's also a different offense. So I'm feeling more confident about Ashton Daniels than I felt the last 2 seasons, which I wouldn't have said in the summer.
I mean, I think the Auburn tape, for one thing, I think is more representative just based on, the skill players at Auburn were pretty solid. The offensive line was bad. But if you watch back that Alabama game, like, he really kept them in that game, and his receivers by that point weren't helping him out very much either. I've been optimistic for a while. I agree with you. When they first went and got him, I was kind of like, wow, really, this is the best you can do there. But I in the end think, and the way I described it compared to Tommy, is like, yeah, you probably aren't going to have, an Alabama game type moment where you look at it and you're like, wow, that was just a great QB performance. You're also not going to have, these kind of crazy turnover, okay, it's Tommy Castellano's time type moments with Ashton Daniels. And I think that's a worthy trade-off when you have the running back room and the receiver room that you have. And I think, with DJU, that was back when FSU had the spring showcase or whatever, and I remember going and watching that and just immediately being like, yeah, wow, this is not good at all. So I overall, like I said, I think, yes, maybe your ceiling quarterback-wise isn't as high, but I think offensively around him it's gone up quite a bit, so I think that doesn't matter as much, and I think your floor is higher. I wouldn't be too worried about, like, yeah, he had some turnovers at Stanford. Who's not going to? Stanford has been pretty noticeably bad at football since, 2017.
But you watch most of those interceptions, and I don't want to bring up Dak Prescott, but it's like a Dak Prescott. Like some of those interceptions, they say he's an interception merchant, but like some of those interceptions are like straight in the receiver's hands. It's weird bounces. So not every interception was on him. So it's a little deceiving looking at that stat.
I think the biggest thing that has come out of camp that stood out to me is his athleticism is one big thing we've heard a lot about. I don't think that's something I was expecting, even though he's a mobile guy, but I don't think I expected for people to come to me and tell me, like, no, dude, like, he's really fast. Like, I wasn't expecting that at all, and I think that's going to play big into this Mike Norvell offense, right? That's something that has been needed for Norvell to have a good offense, right? That's why Jordan Travis thrived, and it made up for the offensive line maybe not being that great and stuff like that. So it's worked, and that's something that I think will have to work for him to be good. But yeah, basically what's been said is like, yeah, his athleticism is crazy, and he doesn't make all the throws, but that's not something like again, as you said, you've seen the tape. We know we can't make all the throws. We know like that's been proven. And I think the biggest thing is just keeping the ball out of harm's way. That's like, as you guys said, that's what he's been worst at, and I think that's what it's been the biggest improvement from him this camp as well. He said that they think he's playing well. They think he's been impressive, and I think, and it was weird. I agree with y'all. It was weird when they announced the starter. Nobody was expecting it. Like, I was literally on the toilet and was like, I got to go do work. And it was like that's literally like how it went down. No one knew it was coming, and but I think the benefit of that is he's had this full fall camp to not worry about that and to build confidence as the starter. And I think it's kind of helped him settle in and become more comfortable. I think that's been the biggest thing. And yeah, everyone loves to talk about Malachi Marshall behind him. I do think I bet there'll be an or between him and Sperry's name, but I do think Marshall is the number 2 from everything I've heard, and it's which is good to see. I mean, he's got an arm. His issue is his size, but it's I think Daniels is going to be fine. I really do. I think that's one, and it's also, if you've talked to him or have seen any interviews with him, that's one kid you really want to root for. I don't think we've had that since Jordan Travis. Not that DJU or Tommy were bad guys, but you can just see, like, this is a kid, like, everyone is such a likable kid and is very smart. I mean, he has a Stanford degree. That's got to help in some way, right? At least reading the field, you would think. And I mean, yeah, but it was weird at Auburn is he had good receivers. Like, he had Cam Coleman and Singleton, who's now at Florida. I think Hugh Freeze is just an idiot. And
yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence to back that up. So.
If you ask an Auburn fan, like, I've asked a couple Auburn fans, like, they were like, they wish Ashton Daniels would have started the whole year, and they think they would have been better. And I think that says a lot. That, like, I think he is one that has a chance to surprise a lot of people. But again, it doesn't, like, I hate that you knocked my guy Dak Prescott, but you look like Brock Purdy.
I'm not knocking Dak Prescott. I mean, I'm a Cowboys fan myself, so I'm saying, like, I was more so just going out of my way to defend Dak Prescott and Ashton Daniels in the same sentence.
That's good.
So that was the comparison.
But also, like, what if he's Brock Purdy? Like, Brock Purdy's a system quarterback who's fine. That's all you need. If the offensive line is serviceable, you don't need anything else.
Right. Well, and I remember we talked about this a few Tomahawk talks ago about the same thing where they're kind of trying to run the same game plan that they did with DJU, where we're going to try and make everything as easy as possible. All right, we're going to try and run the ball. We're going to try and have good receivers. Just don't lose us the game. As far as we've heard, that's what it sounds like. It's going well. It sounds like out of camp, they feel like he's in good control of the offense, like he understands what's happening, and that the guys around him are helping him out. And then as far as Malachi Marshall, I think the one negative that you could take away from that is that Sperry seems to have kind of floundered, and no one seems that excited about him anymore. I mean, man, Gus Malzahn loved him. Mike loved him too. They talked him up when he came in, and especially this fall, it's just like, yeah, Malachi looked really good. And I mean, Sperry's name has barely been brought up at all.
Well, you know how good Norvell is at developing quarterbacks.
Right, of course, right.
He's one of the best.
I think with them announcing that decision in the spring, it already kind of sent that message, because there's 2 reasons that you keep a quarterback competition going. Because like you said, if you know Ashton Daniels is going to be the starter, you just want him to be able to work. So either you don't know who the starter is, or you have a young quarterback who you don't want to leave. And I feel like they maybe kind of looked at Sperry and were like, well, we want to keep him around, but like not that desperately. I think that's kind of reflected in how it's been with Marshall coming in, that he's been able to make it this quickly to where it's, a battle for the backup spot, and seemingly it's leaning towards Marshall. I think it is another mark on Norvell of it seems like he's not great at developing the quarterbacks that he recruits. But
well, I think the important thing is, who cares who's better as long as like one of them is good. I think that's my perspective of it is, like, Everyone's really high on Malachi Marshall. Will, you were pretty high on Malachi Marshall, right? When we got him. Or am I mistaken?
I've actually been the guy who's kind of been, raining on the parade of people who are like, oh, we need to see him as soon as possible because
you don't. You don't.
And you don't. And I think that's what happens when you get, especially a JUCO guy coming in, as fans immediately are like, oh, look at the numbers this guy put up, like he's going to be great. And I'm like, okay, guys, he's like 160 pounds. Okay, let's give it a minute. It's really, there's been a few guys who have come in and played, their first year at programs and have kind of skewed the view. A lot of times quarterbacks throwing them out there is not a good thing. And you can say like, yeah, you want to get reps. Like, yeah, I want him to get reps against New Mexico State. I don't need to see him against Alabama in week 3. Like that's not going to be productive at that point.
I think a lot of it with how Norvell handled the quarterback situation just the last, I'd say 5-6 months, like when they named Ashton Daniels a starter early in the summer or late in the spring, for me that was like, okay, in another year when Norvell's job is completely safe, maybe he gives a guy like Kevin Sperry a better look. But he knows he's coaching for his job. He needs a guy that is more experienced, has played in big-time college football games. That's going to be a guy that he can lean on more so than putting it on a sophomore like Kevin Sperry that is not that experienced. For me, it's like I don't even need to see Malachi Marshall as soon as possible. But if Ashton Daniels starts to turn the ball over, if he's putting the ball in harm's way, if he's losing games for Florida State, how long is his leash? How long is Norvell going to leave him out there? Like, is this a guy that's going to start all season no matter what? But if it hits the fan, like, is he coming out? Are they making a change? Is Norvell trying to save his job? That's obviously a conversation for, I think, a month or two in advance, but I think that should be in the back of every fan's head.
Yeah, and it's also like you didn't bring Ashton Daniels in to truly compete with a second-year redshirt freshman. Like, let's be honest. Like, you're not bringing in a redshirt senior, I guess 5th year now is what you have to call it, but it's you're not bringing him in to compete with Sperry truly. It wasn't that in the spring, yes, because that brings the best out of both of them, but that's never truly what was going to happen. Ashton Daniels always had the inside track there. It was weird the way it went down, but it's always probably what it was going to lead to. You just get it over with. And yeah, it is weird. I think they didn't, because they obviously went cheap on quarterback when you go to NIL and stuff. I think that's been said. You weren't paying the millions for Calandria or DJ Lagway. That's pretty clear. And I think GM John Garrett said that in a press conference too, that like they went cheap at that position. So it's no secret. Now with being cheap, you probably don't need to have a long leash as you did with a DJU or a Tommy Castellanos, right? If something goes wrong, you can replace them, and you're not thinking too much in that, like, oh, we just paid this guy $1 million because he didn't make $1 million. Like, I am very comfortable saying that he's making less than $1 million. So with that, you can do that. Malachi is it's a weird one just because of the way it happened. I think the reason why everyone loves him is because of the unknown factor of it. We've seen Sperry, we've seen Daniels play for other teams, but you've seen his JUCO clips, and he has an incredible arm, and you know it, and I think that's why everyone loves about it. That's why, and he puts out all the videos. I think it's a perfect storm and also the backup quarterback's always the most likable guy on the team. Everyone loved Brock, and then everyone loved Luke Kromenhoek after that. So I think that's just the way it goes.
I agree. And so now that we've wrapped up all the position group, did anyone have anything more to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I think Malachi Marshall is like the perfect guy that, especially building off the hype of like a Trinidad Chambliss, where it's a guy that's coming from, I know it's not JUCO, but he's coming from D2. No one knows what to expect, and now he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. But I think there's a very good chance like he just comes in and just stinks it up, and it's like the worst quarterback play you've ever seen.
Off the exception to the rule there, which fans will do, but like, you have to trust the staff is going to know not to do that.
And then it hurts the confidence, which makes it snowball even more. Yeah. I mean, that's what you saw with Luke Kromenhoek, with Brock. Like, that's exactly what happened. Once you lose confidence as a quarterback, like, you have nothing. Same thing with kickers. Like, confidence is half the battle. It's just the 6 inches between your ears.
All right. Well, I wanted to move into the new position coaches, but I think carrying on this a little bit, it's not a new position coach. He's returning to his old job. Mike Norvell will be calling plays on offense this year. How do we feel about that? Especially with the personnel that they have.
Better than with Gus, honestly. Right. So I think that's an upgrade. I think you look at pre-2024, Mike Norvell had a positive reputation as a play caller. I think the truth's probably a little bit somewhere in the middle, but he's got a way better, group of weapons there. 2024, you can kind of write off as that team was just kind of quit. at a certain point, there was not much that anybody could do there, so I'm not going to look at that and say it's a direct reflection of Norvell as a play caller. I think Malzahn, if you looked at the numbers, you'd be like, oh, wow, that offense was really good last year. Sometimes, yeah. And then there were situationally they were not. There were a lot of spots, a lot of groups we touched on with the running backs where guys just disappeared. That was the most frustrating thing was personnel. So I trust that to be more under control. So I feel optimistic about it. I think it's better than bringing in a completely new guy and a completely new system. You keep Tim Harris around as the offense coordinator in name so that you do still have the concepts there too from Malzahn blended with Norvell's play calling. I think that's a lot better than, getting like Brennan Marion and being like, okay, cool, we're going to bring a whole new offensive system here and overhaul everything for all the players who have been here, all the players coming in, like everybody's learning a new thing.
I think that would be more exciting from like a fan's perspective instead of just like, okay,
an
Norvell's
uninformed fan probably.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But like, I mean, the majority of fans would be like, oh, Norvell's calling plays. Like there's Norvell's name is just synonymous now at Florida State, especially, as of where he's at right now. But like my question is Tim Harris just sticking with the wide receivers? Like, is he helping out Norvell with the play calling? Is he just offensive, like you just said, is he just offensive coordinator name?
I think it's a little bit of both. I do think he is helping a little bit, and obviously not to an extent of calling plays, but he has called plays before. For a couple games at UCF under Gus, I believe he called some plays, and there was a few scrimmages in the spring where I think Norvell wanted to see a full picture of the scrimmage, so he had Tim Harris call some plays, I believe. So it's, I think he's definitely helping him with that, and the game plan side of it, I think he's huge with that. Also a name that you kind of have to bring up, it's a little bit inside baseball, but Gabe Fertitta, who was on the staff, he was an assistant offensive line coach in 2023, and 2024, I believe, and came back as kind of that. His job is basically the liaison to combine the Norvell and the Malzahn offense and see what concepts they like the best and bring them both together. And that's been a big part of his job this year. And I think that's pretty big. And my thing with the Malzahn offense is it's so gimmicky. Right, and also what I don't want to do is the jet sweep to Danzy against Alabama, that's fine. Like run it against Alabama. Don't run it against East Texas A&M and whoever else they played, because then Virginia sees it on film a bunch of times and look, they tried to run it against Virginia. What happened? They stopped it pretty easily. So I think it's be more selective with those plays instead of giving out too much too early against New Mexico State, so you can bring something like that against SMU and they don't have it on film. I think that's the more important thing. I think that's what Gus's biggest downfall was last year. He just emptied the book way too early and way too often against those nobody teams. So I think if you don't do that, he'll be okay. And also I like him calling the plays because you're going down with the ship. If he's going to get fired, at least it's on his terms and he's doing it his way. And I think historically he has been successful with it. That is a fact, right? It's been a little weird. I always go back to, I was in the Stanzas game. I was a student, but I wasn't a student. I was first year working. Clemson game 2023, it felt like it was 4 verts to Johnny and Keon the entire time, and you throw it up to him and see what happens. I don't love that because that's not much of a game plan to me, but I think if you can dive deep into it, I think it's good for the program that he is calling plays.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I was gonna say the exact same thing.
It's also like the game plan last year offensively just fell apart, but at least like Norvell in the back of his head, like the Tommy was like, F it, Deuces down there somewhere. Like Ashton and Mike and Norvell have that in their back pocket. If all else fails, like at least they have something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So moving on to other new position coaches, I believe there were 4 main position coaches that were hired in this offseason. We touched on Ernie Sims already, but on defense, there's a defensive backs or corners coach, Blue Adams, and then ends coach, Nick Williams. I'll start with Nick Williams because he's the one that I've seen and heard more about. I really like him. I think 3 out of the 4 hires that they had are young, and most of them I've heard are extremely energetic. And Neil Williams is definitely one of those guys where just a little we've seen at practice and then heard from the media, like he is fired up all the time. And I think a position group last year that really just didn't have that aspect to them, was James Williams bringing that every game? I doubt it, right? I think that his hire, especially just from what I've seen, I like it a lot.
Yeah, I like him, and I think the same goes for Cam Martin, the running backs coach of the big energy guys. Nick Williams, we interviewed Jalen Anderson a couple weeks ago, and he was like, Nick Williams wears cleats, which is a big thing for players to see coaches wear cleats. It shows like you got that dog mentality, kind of the same thing. And he's like Nick Williams will talk crap to the players with his players, which is really funny to watch. Like he'll be talking crap to Chimdia with Jalen Anderson or Rylan Kennedy or Xavier Chaplin. And it's a cool, fun energy because he also gets on their asses. But at the same time, it's just because you love them, right? So it's been really cool to see. And he did in his media said like, well, if I'm not doing that, like I'm not giving my best as a coach. So which is really cool to see. I think Nick Williams is good, and I think it's good just to have an edges coach. That just wasn't something you had last year, right? It used to be Papuchis, and then Papuchis moved back to linebackers, and then you just had the whole D line. And then again, you go back to you didn't have the true jack position. That's probably part of the reason. So that's where like I do like having an edges coach, and Nick Williams being a hometown. He's from Bainbridge, so not that far. So being a hometown guy too, I think helps.
Yeah, I'm really excited about Cam Martin. When I heard he was getting hired, I was like, wait a second, is that the Cam Martin from Auburn? No, because I remember watching him play there. His track record, obviously, he started coaching in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, but has worked with R.J. Harvey at UCF, worked with Dominic Richardson at Tulane, two really good, productive running backs. And just having a young presence in the room there, too, who's not too far removed from having played. I think all of that is a super positive thing in that group.
And every year he's coached, he's had an 1,000-yard rusher.
Pretty good sign.
So we'll see.
I was going to say, I think, honestly, of the hires, I would put him for – I actually, during the media luncheon in spring, I ate luncheon and then interviewed him. And he's just a really cool guy. Yeah, he's young. He's into it. You know, he knows those guys. I would say, you know, closer just because he's closer to his time that he played in college, especially a guy like Chroma at, you know, bigger crew at a big school. I think it's helpful to have a guy like that who knows that experience really well. And
you see, when we were at practice that one time, and I accidentally got pretty too close to the running back drills at one point. I didn't without realizing it, but he the way he interacts with them is very. I don't want to say friendly is the wrong word, but when it's in a break of practice and they're all there just talking crap to each other, he gets in with them too. Like it's almost having a player coach, as you're kind of alluding to with him not having played that long ago. Like it's really, yeah, that was one that you looked at the interaction. You can tell like that group is close knit and gets along really well.
Going back to the players, which are the most important part of a football team, what are the most important things or position groups that have to go right in order for this team to succeed?
They got no quit. I can't see any of these players quit on this team this season. I think it's just something that has happened the last two seasons. And a lot of these returners, which I think is a good thing that most fans could sit at home and think about, is like the guys that are returning are the guys that are, I think, fully bought in and aren't the guys that are going to quit. But they need those returners to be those leaders. If it does fall apart at the end of the season, like I don't want to see these guys that have had some of them great careers at Florida State. I don't want to see them finish off their careers at Florida State like how some of the past seniors have the last two seasons. So that's the biggest thing for me is just like keep your head down, go to work. And I don't know, for me, it's like every time I'm around the facility, it's like you see all these signs, like all the memorabilia, and it just feels like it doesn't mean as much anymore. Like it feels like the brand of Florida State has almost crumbled in front of itself. Like it just, I think these players just need to remember the university that they play for, the brand that they play for. I know the state of the program is not great right now, but they have a chance to change, turn the page, fight for their head coach, fight for him to keep his job, fight to put Florida State back on the map. I mean, I saw a post the other day. It had Florida State ranked as like the 79th bank.
Was that like R.J. Young's top one?
Yeah. Oh, well, and like he's an idiot. So
he had like
I don't
Montana
care.
State above him.
I know.
Yeah.
No, they were like directly ahead of us.
Montana State was like two. Yeah. So
but R.J. Young's a complete dumbass.
But that's just like the state of the program, and these players. You know their reading stuff. They know what team they're playing for. They know the state of Florida State football. So don't quit. Like remember, and this is all off the field stuff. Like it's mentality stuff. But a team with a poor mentality is never going to be a good football team. It's just. That's some part of the name of the game. So like keeping a good mentality and just remembering that this is Florida State football and forget the last two seasons. Go on the road, win a game for the first time in almost 3 years. Win a game on the road. Be a good team at home. I know the first road game is Bama, so like it might continue for a little bit, but like I think the biggest game is that SMU game just to start. You're going to see what this team is made of. I know you have 2 night games with New Mexico State, but a night standalone game on ESPN against a ranked team. That is the time to show not only your fans, but the country what the team is made of and to start the season on the right note.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's well said. I think that ties in also to just one key, I think, is don't let a loss become 4 losses like it did last year and like it has in the past. Like they seem to have no ability to rebound from, a disappointing performance. And if that's going to happen, there's multiple spots on the schedule where they either could or maybe even should lose 2 games in a row. Well, if that happens, are you going to, because one of those stretches, I know we'll talk about the schedule, one of those stretches is Louisville, Miami, both on the road. I would expect them to lose both of those games. Are you going to let that turn into a loss against a Clemson team that you very, very much could beat at home on Halloween? Are you going to roll over? Are you going to be able to rebound there and then lead into that road stretch against Boston College, Pitt, homecoming, NC State, Florida? Like, you could go 5-0 in those games. You can also turn around and go 1-4, let's say. I don't think Boston College has much of any chance, but I don't know. Who's to say for sure?
Yeah, I agree. I think those are the intangible things that you just have no clue of until you get there. And that's been the case last year. I mean, nobody could have predicted that going into 24. You hoped it would have changed, and you thought it did, with 25. And this year, you hear the players, you hear the coaches, they say all these things, and it makes you feel better, but they have to go out and prove it. Because really, I mean, you're not going to find out until maybe even after Alabama. It's like if you lose to both SMU and Alabama, I feel like you're in a pretty bad spot. But if you beat SMU, you're probably going to lose to Alabama.
I think they're mad about last year. Alabama.
I
think they're going to, yeah. I feel like they might take that out on them a little bit. There's no Edwin Joseph on this team, which should be helpful.
But that's the point. Like those kinds of things where you don't want to blame it on one player or one position coach or whatever, but like who knows?
But there might be an Edwin Joseph on this team. Like you don't know. And like the hard part is about like what we're doing right now is none of us really have any idea. Like there's only a handful of guys on this team that you really know what you're probably going to get from them, but the rest of them are all question marks. We can sit here and analyze and what you've seen in practice, but like it was going back to what you were saying about Ashton Daniels. Ashton Daniels looks great. He's not turning the ball over. He's protecting the ball. He's doing that, on the backfield at practice. When he's in front of 40,000 fans at Doak Campbell, that's when it might change. So it's hard to predict these kind of things, especially before the year when you aren't seeing the team play against another opponent that they're not going against every single day. That's why, like, completely off topic, but that's like why the art of like the NFL joint practices are so great, because you're seeing them against different competition. Like these guys have been facing each other for 5 months. So when they go play a different team, it's a totally different dynamic.
And that's why it's good to get a week 0 game to kind of tune that up, right? You can use it as a scrimmage, basically, that you're probably, don't fully go on as a scrimmage or else you might lose the game. But like it take it seriously, but you get a good tune-up and you do get to see that, and you can make those adjustments pretty quickly into SMU. I think that's what worked well for them in 2022 against LSU. You had that tune-up game against Duquesne, and then it makes it easier to transition and then go into a big game. Yeah, I agree with Will on the just don't let it snowball. And I think a big thing that stood out to me that might not happen is Ashton Daniels. So I didn't realize this, and it's one of those things that like you kind of but you didn't really, when you hear it said, you're like, oh, really? Ashton Daniels has never been to a bowl game.
Wow.
Which, like you said, like you look back, like he was on pretty ass teams, but it like it makes sense. But you hear to hear it said is wild. And so that's a guy who's going to fight for that 6-6 just because he wants that experience of a bowl game, right? That's someone who's going to be in the room not allowing that to happen, which I think is huge to come from a quarterback. And same with a guy like Deuce. Like Deuce is a guy who will do that as well. So I think that's what a positive side to that's where I think they'll be better with that this year. And then you go to they feel closer this year, which will help too. And I think the new building plays a big part in that. I think because they want to be there. I mean, why would you sit in your apartment when you have access to a barbershop, a whole players' lounge, two players' lounges, which is a bunch of different games? Like, there's no reason to sit at home when you can go be spending time with your teammates at the facility, or like go sit in the hot tub. And that place was insane. But it's that has brought a lot of it together, I think.
Well, Will mentioned it, and I think a good transition here would be now with the schedule. I think there's a real the unfortunate possibility of this team could be significantly better than last year's team, and the schedule just not work out in their favor.
I just think that tough stretch is like, and I think it's favorable because of the time that they have bye weeks. Like, you have a bye after that SMU game, going into that Alabama game. That's why I just think that SMU game is so crucial, because like you said, if they lose that SMU game, you're going into a bye week and you're facing a top 15 team in front of you in Tuscaloosa. You haven't won a road game since the ACC championship in 2023. or a game away from Doak Campbell Stadium for that matter. So you lose to SMU, the season is off the rails already. So I just think that's the biggest game. And then that Louisville-Miami back-to-back, it's horrible. I mean, it's horrible for the schedule. And that is the week that I kind of have circled, that week after the Miami game. They have another bye week. So that is the time when you're sitting. So that's their Miami game is their fifth game.
Like so, it sounds right.
Seventh
game. So you're either sitting there. So if you're predicting the schedule, you're saying lose to Louisville, Miami, and Alabama.
So you're 4-3 at that point, yeah.
Or if you lose to SMU, you're 3-4.
And you got Virginia in that mix
Yeah.
too at home, which I've looked at as a pretty key point in the season where if you are 2-2, you absolutely have to win that game, and if you're 3-1, again, same thing you were saying, you still look ahead.
Yeah.
At Louisville and Miami, you're like, yeah, we probably should beat Virginia here, which Virginia, a bit more of a question mark maybe if they can get to where they were last year, but I mean, going to be a competitive team again.
Very experienced. Like I think they have the
Yeah.
oldest team in college football.
The
Pretty
whole
close to
offensive
it.
line is
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, I forgot that game was that's October 3rd. So I guess
Yeah.
it is a few weeks before that. But just going into that stretch, like if they're anywhere from 2-5, 3-4 going into that bye week, it's
Then you wonder if you're firing Norvell at that bye
right,
week.
exactly. Like that's the date I have circled because I'm also curious to see what you guys have to say, but I'm of the belief that if they're like treading water most of the season, I don't see them firing Norvell before the year ends. Like, would you sit here right now and say you're confident that Mike Norvell will be coaching on the sidelines for that Florida game?
I can't say I'm confident now that from what we've heard, they want to avoid doing a midseason firing, I think, but it's weird because I don't think you have an option to wait for the end of the year
Yeah.
if that's what it's going to be. High school signing day is championship week. So you can't, like, unless you're giving up on the whole recruiting class altogether, you have to fire a midseason if you're going to do it. You don't have a choice, or you at least need to make it known. You know, you could do hey, you're done at the end of this year, but you can coach out the season. You could do that, but it's I just don't think in today's age of college football, you can't wait to the end of the season. I think it's a lot more hurt if you do that because you just need to get it going as soon as possible.
Yeah. And if they go into that stretch, like we just said, or that bye week, like I think 3-4, he's out. I even think like maybe 4-3. There's a discussion, especially when you're at a bye week.
I think 4-3 when you've had presumably 2, maybe 3 top 15 teams.
It's probably
as the
a winning
losses is
record's probably
yeah.
There's at least a discussion to be had because I mean,
I think that Clemson game becomes really important at that point because
Definitely.
then if you drop to 500, you lose to Clemson, who again I would expect to be. They should be in the same category, if not a little bit worse than Florida State on paper this year. I know people are going to put them preseason top 25 because that's just what we do with Clemson, but there's really no basis behind it. So if you go in 4-3 and you lose to them, and you're, again, looking at a 2-week road trip in November to the Northeast, I don't know if you're super optimistic going forward from
Also,
there.
I believe Pitt's coming off a bye that week, and it's a short week. So it's like an insanely hard setup. Like that game, like I write up Pitt as a loss just because of the setup of it. Like you're going to Boston, back, then to Pittsburgh on a short week, and they're coming off a bye. Why we need to get out of the ACC first off. But it's just a really bad setup.
I was gonna say like the second half of the schedule is a little bit easier than the first half of it, especially after that bye week. But the sad part is like those games might not even matter at that point. So it's hard to sit here and say like, I mean, I'm also just high on Pitt. So like, aside from that Pitt game, I think they're obviously the toughest opponent. And then you have Florida, which I think they're a big question mark for the most part. And Clemson. Besides that, I mean, the rest of the games, I mean, those three
drawing
compared
Clemson and NC State both at home is important
Yeah.
because going into Carter Finley is
Impossible.
Well, impossible,
Yeah.
yeah.
and you're gonna line up like those 3 or 4 games against at Alabama, at Louisville, at Miami, which is absolutely brutal. I mean, I don't know who these schedule makers are, but
It's the ACC.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, that's-
Miami got none of this, by the way. Miami got the easiest schedule
Yeah.
known to man in the conference.
that's I mean,
Is Miami? They don't play Louisville or SMU.
Nope.
do-
None of the ranked teams. They got
Wow.
none. It's
Good for them.
That's why you
yeah,
need to get
that's
out.
what everybody wants to see is the toughest team not even get slightly challenged.
Hey, maybe they can go 13-0 and get left out because the schedule's not hard enough.
Real.
well, they've never won an ACC championship, so
Don't jinx it, man. Anything can happen. Okay, before we wrap up, and I know we've talked about how kind of impossible this is to do. Final record predictions?
I think they'll be 4-3 going into that bye week. I do think they'll beat SMU and Virginia. I think Alabama you just got to hope it's not like a 30-plus point loss with that one. I don't think Alabama's going to be that great, but again, I think the emotion after last year's game is going to play in a lot. I think Miami's just better. Louisville, short week going up there. I know Friday night games, sometimes just weird stuff happens, but I think Louisville's just a better team. I'm going to give them a win. Clemson, like I said, I think Florida State should be better. I think they get that game at home. Halloween, it's going to be a really good atmosphere. Give FSU the win there. They beat Boston College on the road just because Boston College is so awful. I agree, Pitt's a loss. NC State at home, I think, should be a win. I'm not nearly as high on them as some people are. Florida is a bit more of a toss-up. I think I would look at it as a loss. I'm a little bit higher on Florida right now than some other people are. But, yeah, I'd go 7-5.
So when I did it 2 weeks ago, I think I said 9-3. I'm gonna say 8-4 sitting here. And
what made you say 9-3?
We were doing a show like this, and like it was just.
Was that when you said 9-3, but you named off 4 losses, or did you say 10-2 and named off 3 losses?
I think that was 10-2. But
okay.
No, this was when Gus and I were doing our show, and I said we were really going in depth. I said, looking at it now, I think Bama, Louisville, Miami. Not even Louisville. I would say Bama, Miami, Pitt were like my 3, I would say, penciled in losses. But I have confidence in the Louisville game. I have full confidence in the SMU game. I don't know how you guys feel about that one. But like my biggest thing is they beat SMU at home on a Monday, and then you have 2 weeks to go prepare to go play on the road against Alabama. Like,
ooh, pick them to win.
Ask me on like September, what would that show be? The 15th,
something like that. Yeah.
So like on that show, I might.
If they're 2-0, that'll be fun.
Exactly. Like, and no one's gonna give them a chance to win that game, and like that's chip on the shoulder. You have the chance to do it 2 years in a row to the mighty Alabama Crimson Tide. So I say 4 losses because I think you could shuffle in a combination of probably 5 or 6 teams. But
you hate Louisville, huh?
I hate Louisville.
That sounds like it.
No, I don't hate Louisville, but like you could pick 5 teams. You say SMU, Bama, Louisville, Miami, Pitt, Clemson, 6 teams. Like 4 of those, you're probably going to lose, and you're not factoring the Florida game. We'll get to that, but like those 6 games, you hope that they can at least win 2 of those games, and that gives you. And then that also comes with the caveat of they don't drop a game to a team like Virginia. God forbid they lose to Boston College on the road. But I'm going to go 8-4. I'm not going to go game by game because I think it's
because you'll mess it up again. Apparently,
yeah. I mean, unless you want me to go game by game, but I might get my math wrong, and Will call me out again for every show for future reference.
I was going to say, I don't think I was either, just because I think the number, I mean, this is kind of always how it is, but the number of wins is more important than exactly how it looks.
Yeah, I agree.
I think 8 wins could look very different depending on how it goes, but I would say for me, 8 is the right number. Who knows? Especially with the road matchups, it's like Pitt and Louisville on the road. Yeah, I mean, who knows?
It's just like we can't sit here and predict a win on the road. You can't. There's nothing to show you in the last 2 seasons that they can do that. So it's like they could very well go. I think they have 7 games at home this year. If I'm right, I'm not going to count.
You're right, yeah.
But so they can easily win every game at home and lose every game on the road. I don't think that's going to happen, but there's nothing to sit here and say they're going to win a game on the road. So, like, you can make that argument.
You'd really have to screw up to lose to Boston College this year.
Well, to Stanford.
Right.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah.
I agree. I like 7-5 just because but it could flip quickly, right? You lose to SMU, and that is with SMU having a win. I think more people have them beating SMU than not now. They're just looking around. I think then that'll be a good one. Again, the season hinges on that game, it feels like. Because as we said, Mike Norvell teams, normally they'll hit that spiral. So we'll have to admit it's good they have a bye week after to try to regroup if they do lose that game. But it's, I have 7-5 for the most part. Yeah, I do think we'll get our first road victory in 2-3 years at Boston College. I think that's a pretty good bet. But it's like you're not going to beat Miami in Miami. You're probably like Louisville's tough. But like so the 7-5 probably hinges on that Clemson game when you're really looking at the schedule. Clemson and NC State for the most part, because those are teams you've struggled with in the past. But the fact that it's at home is huge to me.
Well,
no one wants to mix in like a 4-8 projection just to be safe here.
I can't bring myself to do it. I just can't.
What did you say again? 7-5?
Yeah.
So, do you guys think 7-5 gets the job done for Norvell?
I was
He's back
ask
another
the same
year.
question.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it would. It depends how it looks, but I
Right.
think it would. I think they'd have a tough time firing him after that, especially because it's an upward projection or an upward. I don't even know what word I'm trying to think of, but
Trajectory.
Thank you. Because 2-10, 5-7, 7-5, so you're on that path up to where next year you can build on that even more so, right? It's kind of got the feel of a 22 team, hopefully, to where you could. Then you get some good wins, and then you get some guys coming back next year, and then can build on that and actually have a good year next year.
I would hope you can build off a 2-10 and 5-7 season. Like
Hey,
hope,
it's improvement.
hopefully,
But
right?
I think if you go 5-7 this year, there's no room for anything about the schedule. He's just gone. But
Yep.
if you go 7-5, there is a lot more nuance to if you can look at it and say, well, they were this close against Louisville and this close against Pitt, and they lost to Miami by a lot, but Alabama was only 12, and it was a really competitive team. They had a tough schedule. If you give them this team's schedule, they would have had 9 or 10 wins. I think that would be enough to keep. Because also, they're not looking for reasons to fire him, or he would have been gone last year. So yeah, I think 7-5 is enough. And now it's enough also for him to still enter next season, presumably at the top of or near the top of a hot seat list going in still. But I think that would get the job done.
I think barring disaster or the team barely squeaking a bowl game, you have to go in and win that Florida game to make a bowl game again. That is my scenario or if the wheels just completely fall off, and I think that is the exception. But
yeah, because that I feel like is the only time where it's mid-season. Like you said, if you're 2-5 going in and the team's just quit 2024 style again, then I think you have nothing that you can do but make a change. In which case, I don't know where you go interim. Do you dare make Tom Herman the interim coach for 5 games?
Well, apparently they hired him just to be the head coach in waiting.
Gia's not going to like that.
I'm going to tell her you said that.
Well, I didn't want you guys name dropped her. I didn't.
Oh, sorry.
So that was
Sorry, Gia.
Yeah.
Well, how many games will Florida State win? Will Ashton Daniels be the saver? Will Mike Norvell keep his job? Who knows? We'll all figure out and continue to learn as the season goes on. That is it for this episode of The Graveyard Shift. Check out Tomahawk Talk Mondays at 7 p.m. Follow VD9 Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And check out our website with all of our writing and photography. I am your host, Andrew Witherspoon. From Cole Kruger, Will McBroom, and War Chant's Matt LaSerre, thank you for listening to this episode of The Graveyard Shift.